Hi everyone, welcome to another video from Crafty Terrain. My name's Lee and today we're going to be looking at how to make this scatter terrain for your battle boards. These pieces of terrain are really easy to make. It's taken about 2 hours to make all three, and what we're going to do is we're going to go up and I'm going to show you how to do that, everything you're going to need, and we're going to go by step guide, so it should be nice and simple for you all to follow at home, and you can make these pieces of terrain for really cheap. Okay, if you want to know more about Crafty Terrain, then we have a video up here, so just follow the link and you can get to find out more about Crafty Terrain. Right, okay guys, let's get started. Okay, this is everything we're going to need to make our rocky outcrops. So for the base I'm going to be using foamex. The reason I'm using foamex is it's lightweight. These are only going to be small pieces of terrain and you don't need any tools really to cut this. You can just cut it with your sharp knife, okay? We're going to need some paint brushes to paint the terrain, some brushes to put your glue on with. Then we're going to need a selection of rocks, okay? These rocks have come from my garden, of them stones, same as these here. And then I got these pieces of slate from a building site where people was doing some work and they let me have the slate. Then we're going to need some paints. So I've got dark chocolate brown, that was a B&Q tester pot. And then for the rocks we're going to go with a dark grey up to a lighter grey, and that's grey hints there. Then we're going to need some black paint to paint the rocks black in the first place. And then for our glues we're going to be using Luke's APS fast drying basing glue to put on the flock and stuff, and I think that's arid grass from Luke's APS already made up. And then we've got our modelling compound to hold everything in place and to build up our ground formations, and that's great because it's fast drying. And then for the glue I'm going to be using a glue gun today just for speed because of filming the video, but you know, you can use super glue to glue the rocks down if you want, or you could use PVA, but PVA will take longer to dry and sometimes rocks don't always hold as well. One little thing with rocks, if you're taking them from the garden or anywhere like that, you need to give them a wash first and then put them in some like tin foil and then into the oven on like 220 for around 10 to 15 minutes just to kill any like bacteria, germs, or to stop anything growing on it after you've put it on your terrain. The last thing you want to do is build your terrain, come back to it in 6 weeks and it's covered in mould and moss and stuff like that. I've also got some sandpaper to foil down the edges of the foamex when we've finished. Okay, so you want to start out by peeling the plastic sheet on your foamex off. Once your protective layers off, you're going to just take your pencil and sketch out the size that you want the rocky outcrops. So I don't want these too big, it's just scatter terrain, you know, to provide that light cover if you're playing Legion or if you're playing another game, just as a bit of scenery or terrain. So I'm going to start at the corner so I don't get much wastage on my foamex, and then just sketch out sort of a natural sort of shape. That'll be one. And then again get a third. Okay, and once you've sketched them out, you're going to get your sharp knife and we'll come back and we'll look at cutting out the shapes. Take your sharp knife, obviously be careful of your fingers, we don't want no accidents, to keep your supporting hand well out of the way. And then we just want to cut into the foamex at the corner and then try to follow your line as best as you possibly can. It hasn't got to be exact, so just try and avoid square edges because obviously we want this to look as natural as it possibly can. Just turn as you go. And then hopefully that should push out. No, it hasn't gone all the way through. Okay, and there we'd have one. I'll get the rest cut out off camera and then we'll get back to you. Okay, so there we have our 3 shapes cut out. The next step that we need to do is bevel the edges of the terrain so it blends in with your board easier. And for that, you're just going to need your sharp knife again. Take it down the edges and then just slowly cut off. Watch your fingers. Just so when it's painted up and blends with your board, you've got a nice smooth transition. See what we're doing there? So then we'll end up with a gradient, then we'll use that as the rim of the terrain and paint that brown or whatever so it'll blend in nicely with the board that you're battling on. I'll get the rest of them done and then we'll come back and show you how that looks. Okay, so we've beveled all 3 edges off now. So you can see we've got a nice gradient. That's a little bit smooth and you can see the blade marks in the edges. What you want to do now is take your sandpaper on a block and then just rub out your edges so you end up with a nice smooth texture like so, where you can't see any of the blade marks, and that will just help with the final finish looking a little bit nicer, and it'll blend into the board a little bit better. So I'm going to get the rest of these all rubbed down and then we'll be back to get the rocks on. Back, all the edges have been sanded down now and look nice and smooth. The next step that we're going to do is get the rocks glued on. Okay, so I'm going to take my hot glue gun, put some hot glue onto the rock and then just place it onto where you want. Okay. The glue gun will dry real fast, so just hold that down, just give it a couple of seconds to bond, and then that should be good. Then I'm just going to place another rock picker formation that I want, and then look to get that glued on top. With these little rocky outcrops, I want to try and leave room to make sure I can get a unit of minis on there as well. And then I'm just going to place a couple of little smaller stones with a flattish edge. Okay. Just like so, and then that'll leave enough room so you can stand your units on with the 25mm bases in between the rocks, or move through it and use it to hide behind and things. I'm going to get the rest of them done and then we'll come back. Okay, so we've glued our rocks on in the positions that we're happy with. The next step now, you want to take your modelling compound, get it mixed up to this sort of consistency, and then you get about 15-20 minutes to work on this before it will start to dry hard. You just want to take small pieces, place it on, and then just spread it out and build it up to the rocks. So this is your ground formation, so it looks like the rocks are coming out of the ground. Get that in all the crannies, fill right up to the edges so you've got no gaps. And this will also help hold the rocks in place, and then just spreading it out with your fingers, and then when it's almost dry towards the end, come back with wet fingers and just smooth that out so you've got a nice smooth ground formation. Luke from Luke's APS has got a video on his channel of how to use modelling compound if you want to watch that if you're unsure. But it's really easy, guys, just place it on with your fingers and smooth it out. So that's coming together quite nicely. You can see the gist of how it's going to look when it's finished. What I'll do is I'll get all that finished off all around the edges and get the other two done, and then we'll come back and show you how that looks. Okay, so there we have our ground covering on all three, built up nicely to the rocks. They're all held in place and look naturally part of the ground. Next step we need to do is take our paint and then paint all that brown. Okay, so we're using that dark chocolate from B&Q's colours range. I think B&Q's paint range has changed now, so probably a different name, but as you can see, it's just a nice dark brown. Don't need to be B&Q, could be any paint really that's dark in brown. It looks like mud, and we're just going to paint that on to all of the base, all the way up to the edge, so you're getting your rim. The only place you need to be careful around really is the rocks, but it doesn't matter too much if you get some on the rocks, because we're going to come back and paint the rocks black next anyway. See, getting some on the rocks, I'll correct that later. And that's the good thing about terrain building. You don't need to be too neat in the early stages, because you can always correct stuff later on, or if you end up with a bad piece of when you've been painting or whatever, you can hide it quite easily with your flock or a piece of grass or something like that, just to hide away all the mistakes that you make in the build process. So as you can see, that's going on nicely. I'll get all these three finished up now, and we'll come back to show you how they look. Okay, so we've blocked all the earth in with the dark brown now. The next step is to dry brush the dark brown so it comes to a lighter hint on the top layers and stands out. And for that we're going to be using our original colour of dark chocolate, and I'm just going to be adding some of the grey hints in on the plate, mixing it in so we get a lighter shade. So some of this, and then just take some of the mix on the side and then just add so we get a little bit of a lighter colour. Mix all that in. So you're happy with your tone, then wipe the excess off on the tissue, and then you can just test on the back of your hand. Then we're going to take and then just brush lightly over the surface, and you can see that on the camera. You should just be picking up all the, we'll have to come back and fill that bit there. Once that's dry, we'll go one stage lighter, mix more white in and bring it up to a brighter level. I'm going to get the rest of them done, and then we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so there we have all the dirt dry brushed up. Now that was 3 layers of dry brush, one with a half and a little bit more of the grey hints, and then a little bit more on top, just to really pull that highlighted areas out. If we take a look at them, they're looking quite nice already. We're going to get them rocks painted up next, so we'll be back to paint the rocks. Okay, so we've had a little tidy up now, so I think we're at that stage where we're halfway through, so I want to keep my workspace nice and clear. The next step that we're going to do is painting these rocks black, and for that we're going to be using this acrylic paint. It's £2 from the works, so just give it a shake, and then I'm just using a plate because it just can wash off the plate real easy. And squirt some out. Brush into the water, just water it down a little bit, and just mix that up. It's quite a good paint, that for £2 from the works. You can see it's got a lot of pigment. So get enough water in that, and that should be enough to do all of these little rocks. And just take your little brush and just paint up to the edge of the rocks. so. And then swap in for my smaller brush to do around the edges, so that I want to keep the black paint off the brown now. Okay, so I'm going to finish them off, get them all nice and neat, and then we'll come and look at all three when they're done. Okay, so we've blacked all the rocks in now on all three. The next step is going to be to dry brush them up grey. So what we're going to do is take some of the black paint and mix it with the whiter paint, so we get something that's in between and grey. We don't want it to be too bright for the first dry brush. Okay, and then I'm using just a piece of card to wipe most of the paint off the brush. You use some tissue as well, just wipe it in, and we can test how that's going to look. And if we go to our rock, and then we just want to catch the surfaces of the rock. This can be our heavier dry brush layer, so it shouldn't be too bright, and we just want to leave the black in the recesses. It's going to help give that stone look when it's all finished. You want to catch the most raised areas on the rocks and then predominantly cover most of the flat as well, because then we're going to come in with another 2 layers brighter to add the finishing touches. So if we can see that there, and that's going to be our first layer, and then finish the other 2, and then we'll come back and apply the highlight. Okay, so the next step, we want to take this dry brush highlight one lighter. So to do that, we're going to use more white paint than we will the black to make a lighter grey. You can look at the colour you used before and then find the colour that you're going to be happy with or that you want. The trick is not to go too light too quick, because it will just be too much of a stark contrast and it will stand out and it won't look natural. One more. Okay, so we'll go with this grey. Just wipe the main excess off into the tissue. And just use a piece of cardboard to just take off the edges, and then just go in nice and light and catch the tops of the rocks. We want to catch the edges and just on the tops of the surface, so we get a nice natural transition from the grey below to the lighter grey. So if you have a look at that, it's starting to really come out now, and we can go again with another highlight after that. So I'll finish the other 2, we'll come back and then we'll look at a lighter coat next. Okay, with them all done, we're going to go to the next stage of the highlight. So take some of the grey that you've got, and if you just move it to the side and then add white to it. Like like so. That will allow you to not use the black. You won't need to use as much paint then to get to the grey level that you need. And we're just following the same process as in this 2 stages before, but then this time we're just going to look to catch the high edges. Okay, so just bring the brush in and then just very lightly now, because you don't want to get too much paint on, so it will stand out too much. Catch all have a look at that. Start to look like rocks. I'm going to finish with the 2 and we'll be back. We're all done, and I'm just going to do one more layer of highlight with the dry brush with a very pale layer, just to make the rocks really pop. Just want most of that off, and don't need much paint on the brush now at all, because we just want it for the edges. And then just lightly come in and flick the very sharper edges. So you just catch the very tops like so. Okay, we get the other 2 done and we'll come back. Okay, they're all dry brushed up now to the nice level that I wanted. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some gravel and a little bit of grass. That's the arid grasslands from Luke's APS range. With this we're going to need to water down some PVA, so just get a plastic pot, squirt in some of the PVA glue. And then just use your brush to mix in some water. And then we're going to apply the PVA to the ground where you want the grass to sit. So probably like around the rocks. You don't want to apply too much, you want to make sure you leave some of the ground cover to come through. And then just take your cover and then just sprinkle the cover on. Just let that hold, and then you can tip the excess back in to the pot. And then you can see you've got your ground cover, and then you can think, do you like that, do you want to add more? I'm quite happy with how that looks, and I'll do the rest and we'll come back. Okay, so we've applied our little grassy bits with the gravel in, and then for the next step what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of clump foliage just for a nice little finishing touch. I'm going to use this dark stuff and I'm going to look to just get it in on the rocks so it looks like a bit of moss growing on the rocks. So pop a bit of glue in there. If we just push the clump foliage into place and then grab some more. There. So you can see the look that we're going to be going for, but it just nicely on top. I'll add a little bit more, not too much to them so you don't want to overpower the piece, but just a little couple of finishing touches like that can just make it look that little bit of a higher standard. So I'll finish them up and then we'll have a look at it when it's all finished. Okay everyone, we're back. I hope you've enjoyed the video today. I hope you found that useful and you can actually apply that at home and build some nice terrain for your own battle boards. If you have enjoyed the video, then leave us a like. If you want to see more from the guys at Crafty Terrain, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. If you've got any questions or if you're struggling with anything to do with this terrain or any terrain in general, then leave us a comment, ask us what you need to know, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible to help you out. Have a great day.